Welcome to the Build on Beauty podcast, where beauty is born skin deep. Now, here's your host, author, speaker, entrepreneur, Cornell Jermaine.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us here. We have a special guest. She is a published essayist and author of All the Colors We Will See, Reflections on Barriers, Brokenness, and Finding Our Way. Please help me welcome our special guest, Patrice Gopo. Patrice, how are you today?
I'm doing really well, Cornell. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, thank you. We've got to dig into some of your story. Now, you're a published essayist, and you have this beautiful book coming out which covers the topics of barriers and brokenness and race and relations. But give us some insight on how you became an essayist or a writer in the first place.
Yeah, that's a great question. It actually wasn't in my background. My undergraduate degree is in chemical engineering, and then I went on to get master's degrees in business administration and public policy because I was thinking about working with under-resourced communities and addressing issues of poverty. But as it turned out, I ended up marrying a man from Zimbabwe, and we were living in South Africa. And at the time, I did not have a work permit, so I wasn't able to work, and it was at that time that I started writing. And I realized that writing had actually been an early passion of mine that maybe got discarded as I pursued my engineering degrees and some of my other studies. And so I just started writing, and I saw that it was a really powerful way to tell personal stories, things that I really cared about. And it was a powerful way to engage in issues like race and immigration and a lot of the topics that I write about in my book. And so I just started writing, and I went on over the years to start taking classes and learning more about the craft of writing, and I discovered how much I love the essay. And so that's how I really got into writing.
Now, you have to share with us a little bit about your experience in South Africa. I'm assuming you're an American?
Yes, I am. I am an American. I was born in Alaska, and I'm the child of Jamaican immigrants. But my husband and I, who's Zimbabwean, we met in South Africa, and when we got married, we were living there for a couple of years.
Wow, so what was that experience like coming from the American culture?
Yeah, I would say it was an interesting transition for me. And honestly, people were wonderful and very kind in South Africa, but it certainly wasn't necessarily my particular experience that I had grown up with. And so there were certainly adjustments there, but I have lived in different places around the world at other times in my life. And as I mentioned, my parents are Jamaican immigrants, so I am aware of just living in other places. So there was a lot to learn and a lot of goodness that I discovered while I was in South Africa. And in fact, my first child was born in South Africa too.
Amazing, amazing story. Now talk to us about this book, All the Colors We Will See. Give us some insight on what it's about.
Yeah, so it's an essay collection about race, immigration, and belonging. And I write from the perspective of being the black daughter of Jamaican immigrants who was born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska, as I said. And I write about what it means to grow up in a country that's very intent on classifying people and defining experiences based on what we look like. And so my experience as growing up as a black American is that I often didn't have an understanding of the very narrow narrative that I often think our country offers black Americans. My parents came to this country as adults, and so they didn't necessarily grow up with the history of black Americans in this country, and so that wasn't something they readily knew. And so my sister and I, as we were growing up, were kind of balancing that reality of having people look at us and think that we understood everything there is to be about a black American, when in fact our parents had this immigrant experience as well. So I often felt like, where do I fit? Where do I belong?
So how did you find your place?
I realized the more I talk with people, the more I realize that we all have our differing experiences with trying to figure out where we fit and where we're part of. And I think at this moment in my life, what I've realized is that I honestly probably connect with a lot of different spheres. It's not just one particular sphere. And so we are the accumulation of many things that form our identity. And that's one thing that I feel like comes through in All the Colors We Will See, is that I am made up of these many different parts that create this one individual person that I am, just like many of us are made up of individual parts that create the person that we are. And so I sometimes feel like this idea of finding that perfect place where I fit or where I belong, that probably is an elusive idea that I may never fully experience. But I think there are wonderful places I've experienced belonging as I've found friends in college, meeting my husband and the family that we formed together, my own family that I grew up with.
Now, you talk about faith and its role in how it helped you find your identity. Give us some insight on how faith played a part in your identity.
Yeah, so one of the things I talk about a little bit is accepting me for who I am and who I was created to be, that this is the story that God gave me. And so I think that's one powerful element that is a through line through the book, is this idea that who I am was who I was created to be, and that there are unique stories and experiences that I have that contribute to the world that we're part of. And so I feel like my faith has reminded me that the person I was created to be is good.
That's so interesting. Now, you cover in this book the essays which deal with race and culture. Give us some of your views as to how what you think as far as race and culture in this day and age, 2018.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And the reality is we are living in very interesting times where I feel like we are recognizing as a society more and more the ways in which race really impacts people's lives and experiences, and just the desire to rid our society of injustice that exists. And so I feel like with my book, I am sharing stories that on one hand, some people will feel very familiar with. I think many Black Americans, many children of immigrants will resonate with a lot of these stories, but I think some of the other stories for other people, some of these stories may be things that they're not familiar with, experiences they haven't heard before. And I think that's the power of storytelling, and the power of this book is that I'm allowing people to engage in many of these ideas about race and culture that they may not have considered before in a way that is through the power of storytelling. So it's not necessarily just telling someone this is this and this is that, but instead I'm just choosing to share my story with people and let that speak into people's lives.
So beautiful. Now, Patrice, tell our listeners how they can get the book.
If you go to my website, patricegopo.com, and then /book, you will see a synopsis of the book and all the links to pre-order it. And, yeah, you can also follow me on social media. My Facebook page is @PatriceGopoWrites, and my Twitter and Instagram accounts are @PatriceGopo. And lastly, I have a newsletter that you can subscribe to if you go to patricegopo.com, and people can sign up for the newsletter, and you will hear more information about the book. I do interviews with other authors in my newsletter and just kind of give updates about what's going on with my writing.
Well, Patrice, I appreciate you joining us here at Build on Beauty, and good luck with you in all of your endeavors.
Thank you so much, Cornell. I really appreciate you having me on the show. And again, I am looking forward to your listeners engaging with the book, All the Colors We Will See.
Well, this has been the Build on Beauty podcast, where beauty is born skin deep. I'm your host, Cornell Jermaine. Until next time, let your soul be made whole. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Build on Beauty podcast. For more information about our host, please visit cornelljermaine.com.